Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another We-CAN workshop. We're thrilled that you've joined us today. My name's Carrie Ramsey, and I'm the project manager for the We-CAN project, which is led by Queen's University. And we love these workshops where we're able to just, be in the comfort of our own office, or some of us are at coffee shops, different spots that we can tune in, we can connect with each other, and then jump right back into the work that we were doing, which so many of us do. But I am so grateful that not only did you sign up for today's workshop to learn more about mindful leadership, but also that you showed up, because there's going to be such a richness when we connect with each other. And let's do that actually right now in the Zoom chat. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know what business you run. If you're not running a business yet, that's okay. Let us know where you're from. Let us know a little bit about yourself. If there's a Zoom link or a LinkedIn profile you want to share, by all means, go ahead and do that. That just gives us all a chance to network a little bit and to get to know folks who are on the call, whether you're from the Kingston region where we are or beyond. So it's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today. So as I mentioned, we're about to head into this workshop on mindful leadership with Susan. Susan is a We-CAN client, and I've worked closely with her over several years now, and I'm just so thrilled that she is going to share her brilliant knowledge, her expertise in this area of mindfulness, and as women, really linking it to our role in leadership. So I am going to allow Susan is going to do the land acknowledgement today as a part of her presentation. So while you are connecting in the Zoom chat and letting us know a little bit more about yourselves, I'm going to hand the virtual microphone to Susan, who will kick it off. So welcome, everyone. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan. I know some of you and not others, like Aru. And I'm so happy to be here and excited about sharing some of my learnings and information with you. But before we get started, I asked Carrie if I could do the land acknowledgement today, because I'm practicing being more conscious of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And one of the requests of the 94 recommendations was that we do land acknowledgement. So I looked up, what does Queen's University do? What does the city do? So today we're living on Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe land. And I really want to acknowledge that we're uninvited guests here, and that we're here to live, learn, and join together in acknowledging this land, both for Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, as well as Métis and other Indigenous peoples who presently live on this land. And I keep growing and learning more about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So thank you for the willingness to let me do the land acknowledgement, Carrie. Thanks. So if you haven't introduced yourself yet, go ahead and do that on chat. I'm really happy that all of you are here. And I came into mindfulness not because I was mindful, but because I needed help. Because 25 years ago, I was a whirling dervish of too busy, too many things. And slowly, as I learned mindfulness and then I studied it, and then I became a practitioner of it, I went back a few years ago and studied it with the Mindfulness Center in Toronto. And then I integrated it into my leadership. I've worked in leadership as I managed the sexual assault team at the hospital for 10 years. I worked at the province. I led the shelters for abused women. And now I run my own practice like many of you. So I've had some really good, hard-won experience as a leader to come to this. And then I went back and got my coaching credentials. So now I'm affiliated with International Coaching Federation. And I do a private practice. I've met with probably 150 people over the last 6 or 8 years as a coach. And I lead mindfulness, and I've worked with a lot of executives. So I'm bringing some of that in our time together today. Okay. And I really want you, I'm going to do an overview of what we're going to cover today. And I invite you to be casual and comfortable with putting a question in the chat or raising your hand or unmuting yourself. We're a small group. And at some point, we're going to go into breakout rooms, but I'm going to start with, what are we doing here today together? And we're going to explore, what is mindful leadership? What are the core elements? And what are specific mindfulness practices and techniques? And what are our challenges and distractions to mindfulness? And I'm going to ask you to think about developing for yourself a personal mindful productivity plan. Because part of what we're doing here as entrepreneurs and as women leaders is also integrating mindfulness. So I hope you go away with something that's of use to you and that you can integrate it into your daily life. So you may already know that the definition of mindfulness, Jon Kabat-Zinn, is really considered one of the greats in North America. And he created the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, and I also trained in that. And he defines mindfulness as being present in this moment on purpose without judgment. Being present in this moment on purpose. And we have so much judgment, he says. We're always judging this, want this, less of that, more of that. So learning how to be more present here with what's going on inside yourself and in relation with others. And Jon Kabat-Zinn is widely accepted as a very powerful definition. The origin, thousands of years before that, was based in the Pali language, which is from northern India. And that defines mindfulness as awareness, attention, and loving acceptance. So similar. Mindfulness has been proven in countless studies and all kinds of research over the last 50 years, including neuroscience, that it reduces stress, brings increased focus, and enhances productivity in our life. So, for example, Stanford University did a study that showed mindfulness actually reduced stress about 30% and increased focus and productivity in some cases by as much as 120%. So if you're struggling with the relentless demands and feeling stretched and juggling too many balls, this may be a path for you. One Harvard professor says that, I loved this metaphor, says that mindfulness is like a piece of the puzzle. First, we put in our corner pieces. We need good sleep and exercise and nutrition. And we also need mindfulness as one corner of our puzzle of our life. The middle pieces are things we can't control, like if you have a teenager, for example, or the weather, the snow, which is beautiful. And also a challenge, the shoveling and, accidents and that kind of thing. We can't control who's the president of our neighbors to the south. We can't control the economy and how that impacts our business or our work. But mindfulness helps us to stay here in the present while all this is going around us, or in the middle of our puzzle, to stay with the metaphor. And for me, I've slowly over years learned to practice it. And I've been practicing coming into human being and less human doing. We're going to do a mindfulness practice in a few minutes. But first, I wanted to integrate that definition of mindfulness with leadership. And I loved this definition by Janice Martorano. And she says our journey to develop the qualities of mindful leadership calls us to be present in this moment, to be still in the midst of activity. And I still aspire to do that, not to do 18 things at once, and to be present as best I can. And as I was preparing for my presentation with you today, when Carrie and I went on early to do a tech check and make sure everything was working, I said, a mentor of mine had said that you can tell the difference between enthusiasm and anxiety by using your breath, by coming back to your breath over and over again. And as you'll see in a moment, that's one of the key mindfulness techniques. And I keep learning how to do different things, which I'm going to share with you in a moment. So I want you to put in the chat, how mindful are you when you're at work? So, for example, 1 is not being mindful at all. I'm just rushing from thing to thing. I've got so much going on, I can hardly pause for a breath. Or 10 might be, hey, I'm like Deepak Chopra or Tara Brach, one of the great meditators of our time. Or 5, I'm okay. Some of the time I'm mindful, some of the time I get lost in being busy. So just put in the chat what your, where you'd say you are. Pretty mindful, not very mindful, a little bit mindful. Right, so we're seeing 5s and 6s and 3s and 8s. I'm most mindful when I'm at work. That's interesting. A work in progress 3, aren't we all, eh? So some 3s, some 5s, some 6s, and 8. So people have varying senses of being mindful at work. So let's face it, most of us have a lot of challenge as leaders and entrepreneurs, and we often juggle home and work at the same time. So we might have a whole bunch of meetings, we might have deadlines where something's due, we might have a sick kid at home or a parent that needs something. So sometimes we might eat lunch while an online seminar, I've done that myself, or going to the bathroom with our phones. You don't need to confess that, but I know many people have told me that, sitting in the bathroom doing scroll. I'm doing it myself, but I'm doing less of it today. Scrolling through social media. Sorry, somehow my phone thought I was calling out, hey Siri. So when we ask today, why is mindfulness so important? It's really, in the last decade, has really taken off. Mindfulness and wellness has become a top focus because of the increase of stress, anxiety, and burnout. We are hyper-connected, relentlessly rapid, and we have a demanding world that's pulling us in a million different directions. So then we might ask ourselves, why should we add mindfulness to our work as women leaders and entrepreneurs when we're struggling with a million different distractions in our lives? So I want to share with you the number of businesses that practice mindfulness. So Google, we already all know that, 184,000 employees. And of course, it's one of the most innovative companies in the world with lots of cutting edge technology. And in the last 5 years, Google has integrated mindfulness and positive psychology in their workplace. They have an entire department dedicated to that. I've worked and coached with a couple of folks from Google, and they've really committed, seemingly genuinely, to incorporate mindfulness in their incredible speed of work. General Mills, you're all familiar with the food that they create, and they've actually put it right into their company's mission to create a healthy working environment and culture, and they have mindfulness. Intel, you might be familiar with them, as a multinational technology company that designs, manufactures, and sells computer components, and they have 131,000 employees. And it originally, a few engineers who felt just slammed by the amount of work and the deadlines they had to do said, we have to change how we're doing our work. We have to be able to have the space and time to be mindful. So they've created a mindfulness program there. And they have found what the research shows us: it increases productivity and lowers healthcare costs. Others include the list there: Fidelity, which is, of course, investment, Goldman Sachs, Nike, hospitals, the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York, and Harvard and Stanford have both incorporated mindfulness. So studies have shown, research has shown that this really benefits people with reducing stress, increasing calmness, and focus, and the bottom line, of course, in our capitalist culture, making money. So it encourages productivity and focus. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I learned when I was studying mindfulness. And I've found the history of, we know we live in a culture of high speed and high stress. And 150,000 years ago, all of us lived on the plains of Africa. And when we stepped out of our caves, if they're plains, I'm not sure there's caves, but anyway, when we stepped out to get food or water, our ancient ancestors, we would have to be on high alert, right? We would have to be, so many people, you get eaten, they had short, brutal lives. So there was a high alert. Our brains are hardwired to find the negative. You've probably heard the phrase negative bias. Our brains haven't changed that much, although we have a larger prefrontal cortex that allows us to plan and execute actions. But when we feel a threatened demand, real or perceived, our bodies and our brains automatically generate a fight, flight, freeze response, right? So a message gets sent from our limbic brain, the ancient brain, which engages or activates our sympathetic nervous system and our endocrine system. So we get into that fight or flight. It's like if you're driving along happily on a country road and you're singing to the music, and then a deer jumps in front of you and you hit it, really, you have no control over that moment. So what we're trying to do is rewire the brain, and we're calming the central nervous system, and we're using our tools to do that more and more often. That's part of our practice here. So when we're in that high adrenaline, state of doing too much, being all stressed, we can actually choose to shift that so that we calm that. And one of the key things is our breathing. That's why I shared that with you earlier. When an acute danger or threat is over, you hit the deer, you deal with the trauma of it. When it's over, we want our parasympathetic nervous system to come into play, which calms us down, rest and digest. You might have heard that phrase. We don't get to choose the fight or flight or freeze response. It happens to us. So what we want to do is proactively learn how to use mindfulness tools to keep us out of that as best we can. Again, anyone hitting a deer on a country road by yourself, is going to have that experience. Some things have it, but what we want to do as soon as we can, we want to shift back to the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms down our whole central nervous system, rather than continuing to stay in that. So any of you, and I'm sure all of us have had points where you're kind of like revved up really high and you're like, "Arr!" That's when you're in that state. So what we want to do is learn how to come back. We want to calm that down. So how do you feel when you're stressed? Just put that in the chat and just say, how do I feel when I'm stressed? What happens to me? Agitated, yep. How do you feel when you're stressed, when you've got too much going on? Overwhelmed, that's a good one, yep. Tense in your body, chest pain, panicked, jumpy, irritable, unfriendly, that's a good one. Yeah. Overwhelmed, jaw clenched, that's that body thing, right? Where we're like, I don't know about you, but my shoulders go up around my ears. I'm kind of like clenching my jaws. Yeah, explosive. Irritable, and then guilt and shame. Yeah. On edge, one little thing could tip me over, self-critical. Right. So we've all got the self-critical is when we tip over into thinking we should be different, right? Yeah, the guilt and shame, right? So learning how to stay out of that, catching ourselves when we're both in that, and then the after thing of guilt and shame of not kind of being good enough. And don't we as women often experience that, right? Overwhelmed and burned out. Yeah, it's true. So what we know is that the relaxation response occurs when we engage our parasympathetic nervous system. So the on switch is about our stress response, overwhelmed, anxious, agitated. And then when we switch it to the off position, we learn how to relax more. We can't be both stressed and calm at the same time. Those things are not possible. So, and it takes at least 30 seconds from stress to relaxation. And that's assuming we have a choice. If we go back to the metaphor of hitting the deer, we have to calm ourselves down, and that will take some time. Some situations take some time, but say you catch yourself doing too much, getting stressed, and you're able to pause. And I'm going to talk in a moment about mindful mini breaks as one of the key things to do to help us switch from stressed to calm. So we need 30 seconds. And we need to do that often, especially at the beginning, but on an ongoing basis. It helps our immune response. That's been shown. And then when we switch to relaxed, it also allows our happy hormones. So endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, these are the body's natural opiates. And we feel good when they're released into our blood. And we can do this through practicing mindfulness. As leaders, women, entrepreneurs, some of us are mothers, partners, all kinds of roles that pull at our energy, not just our work, which is one element. So how do we become more authentic, more fully ourselves while also practicing mindfulness? This thing is a life path for me, not just about work, but I do get to bring it into my work. So here's the core elements of mindful leadership that research is showing us. It offers stress reduction. So it reduces your stress while helping you maintain clarity and calmness, which supports sustainable productivity in your everyday life. I've worked with all kinds of leaders, both all the way up to kind of, VPs. I haven't worked with C-suite, but up to VPs who are just dealing with so much on their plates. And so learning how to reduce their stress also helps them be more clear. It gives us a way to focus, and I'm going to give you you may have heard of this already. I'm going to give you a particular technique around improving your focus on one thing. So even right now, notice, are you worried about your phone? Maybe you're checking your phone. I'm going to invite you to turn your phone off and put it down. If you're checking other things or worried about it, see if you can practice that for the rest of our time together. Just put everything down and concentrate on this, inviting yourself to use this as an opportunity to practice one focus, which in the end, we have to sometimes remember the research. This improves our work life. And of course, it improves our productivity. Because when we integrate mindfulness, we can prioritize more skillfully, especially in the moment, and make clear decisions more quickly. Now, a couple of you talked about guilt and shame. And I know sometimes we have a reaction when we're struggling with how we get kind of stressed like that or other things in our lives. So mindfulness can reduce negative thinking, and it builds our emotional intelligence because we have more capacity to observe what's going on, and it can boost creativity. Research has also shown that mindfulness has these wide range of benefits, and that you as an individual and as a leader and as a woman can grow and sustain a healthy, thriving life more effectively. So more and more companies, that's why they're champion mindfulness. Google isn't doing it because they really care. Well, I don't know, maybe that's my caustic side, right? They don't really care about their employees. What they care about is the bottom line of productivity. And what has been shown is that when we apply these tools, we actually can do more. And we have to sometimes, because it can sometimes seem non-intuitive, right? It's like, oh, that goes against, I have to do more, I have to do more. And instead doing less actually is more helpful. Okay, so we're about to go through these key mindful techniques that I'm going to share with you. And then I'm going to ask you to think about which ones fit for you. So we're going to break these down. So the first one is mindful mini breaks. So I'm going to ask you to join me in a mindful mini break right now. So I want you to put everything down. If you've got anything in your hands, I don't know if you're taking notes. We're happy to send this out as a PDF if that's of interest. Put everything down. Put your feet flat on the ground. Put your hands in your lap. And just close your eyes for a moment. Just close your eyes for a moment. Drop down into your body. And now I'm going to invite you to take a deeper breath than you normally do through your nose. There's lots of research about breathing through the nose. And as you breathe in, have a sense of expanding your belly, your chest, and in your mind's eye, your lungs. Let your jaws soften. Let your shoulders drop. Now take 2 more breaths, just like this. And if your thoughts are racing, just bring them back to your breath. And now open your eyes. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice your jaws. So this 1-minute breathing practice can be used as a transition when you notice you're stressed, to bring you back to the calmness, to shift over from the adrenaline rush of being overly stressed to the calmness and allowing the endocrine system to shift, allowing the brain waves to calm down, allowing the whole central nervous system to calm. Some people find it helpful to say an affirmation. Some people say, oh, poo-poo on affirmations, but I like them. I'm often coaching myself by saying, I can do this. I can make this switch, or I can be present here and now with you. And it can be helpful to just choose something. It doesn't have to be, I can do this, but I'm here, I'm present right now. So sometimes that can be helpful to do that on the exhale, to say your affirmation. You might find for you that mindful mini breaks are something like getting up and walking around the room, going around the block, doing a yoga stretch. So thinking about what a mindful mini break is for you. It's about actually taking a moment or two to break. Some people do it when they first go into sit down at their desk, their office, they pause and close their eyes and take one full breath. So you can do that in different ways, but mindful mini breaks throughout the day. And I really invite you to consider, if you don't already do them, to think about doing something like 5 mini breaks and to think about when you might include those. So this is the technique I talked about earlier. You may have already heard about it, the Pomodoro technique. So it's a time management method that involves breaking work into 25-minute intervals called Pomodoros, with short breaks in between, depending on how big the project is. So this technique is designed to help you focus on a single task without distractions. The technique's named after a tomato-shaped kitchen timer that Francesco Cirillo used as a university student. He's the one who created this. So you turn everything off, like all your phones, all your email, kind of what I just asked you to do. And then you set your timer for 25 to 30 minutes, and then you work without stopping. Every time you want to look at your phone, every time you want to, blah, 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 you just turn it, you just don't. You learn how to concentrate. And this single tasking challenge brings you more into focus and allows you to do things. So you may already do something like it. When the timer goes off, you walk and you breathe, you do a mini break, you get water, and you start again if the project requires more time. This really helped me, especially when I was doing my master's, because I felt like I was going kind of crazy. And it allowed me to really get through things in a way that I couldn't otherwise. The third one that I'm suggesting is that we practice e-blocks. So this would be responding to emails. I'm getting better at it. I'm making progress, but sometimes I feel driven by my emails. They drive me instead of me driving them. So try it for some time if this is something that fits for you. Choosing the best 3 times for you a day and sit down and focus on your emails, single tasking focus. You might even use a Pomodoro technique. Sit down for 25 minutes if you need that long. Don't look at them any other time. You can try that and see. And if you have work colleagues or people who really want to get a hold of you urgently, then that's something you can find another tool to do that. Emails can be driving, or if there's something else you work with that are not emails, then you could think about that. Cell phone boundaries. This is another thing that I've heard lots of leaders that I've worked with kind of complain about. So it's like we need to let ourselves lead our cell phones rather than the cell phones lead us. So for example, you might only leave on during work hours, or you might turn on to airport if you're going out for a walk at lunch or taking a mini break, because your mini break, say your mini break is walking around the block, someone calls you and you're back in it. Think of your central nervous system, the brain wiring, your emotions get agitated, your thinking gets agitated. So we need to find ways to decrease that. And one of the ways is by creating more boundaries, letting work colleagues know when you're available and when you're not. So daily mindfulness techniques are different than mini breaks, because what we want to do is build, John Kabat-Zinn talks about that we're often stressed and thinking out here. So he uses this kind of image of thinking. He says, and then we come back to be present in this moment without judgment, observing what's going on in our system. If we don't learn to do that, it's like going to the gym, right? Because if we don't slowly build up, if we go back and start with 100-pound weights or 50-pound weights, it's not going to help us. I need to start with 3 pounds. I've just joined Aquafit after struggling with an injury last year, and I've just gone back, and I have to go back slowly because I want to leap in. So instead, if we find slower ways to start and we pause and practice, so breathing deeply each day, there's a ton of research. I just read James Nestor's book on breathing, which is fabulous. There's a lot of research that shows us breathing deeply helps in a number of ways. It oxygenates our body. It calms down the heart rate. the central nervous system. Most of us only breathe to about 2/3 of our lung capacity, and we don't spend as much time on the exhale as we do on the inhale. Breathing is a foundational thing. So right now, just while we're here together, breathing in through the nose, our respiratory system is set up through the nose. And when we breathe in through the mouth, it doesn't work as effectively. So just for a moment now, we're going to take in 3 deep breaths, keeping your mouth shut. And as you breathe in, feel the air comes in the nostrils and then down, and then let the belly expand, the ribs expand, and the lungs in your mind's eye expand. And full right up to the top of that inhale, and then exhale. In your mind's eye, imagine the lungs expanding, feel the ribs contracting, the belly button against the spine, and then exhaling through the nostrils. So the invitation is to breathe more consciously during the day. I breathe 10 deep breaths when I wake up, and then before each meal, and then again I do 10 breaths when I go to bed. So that has helped me more often during the day to pay attention to my breathing, and as soon as I pause and stop, it gets me back into mindfulness. Another mindful technique that you might like to try, and maybe you already do it, is practicing deep listening. If someone asks you a question, can you pause and actually be with them in a deep listening way? Doesn't matter who it is. Client, customer, employee, parent, friend, child. Oops, parents there twice. 2 parents, maybe you have 2 parents. And also, it's really helpful to meditate daily. And you can start with 5 minutes. There's a ton of apps out there, Headspace, a ton of apps out there. And then the other thing that I've started to really do over the last few years is make patience and compassion standard operating procedures. We've got all these procedures for work, but we don't often know how to draw on those when we're feeling stressed. So we try and kind of integrate those. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to go into breakout rooms. There's 19 of you here, less me and Carrie, so 17, so maybe 16 of groups of 2. And I want you to think about what are your 2 top productivity and distraction challenges. And you're going to take turns. You're going to take about 2 minutes each. And the listener, I want you to just listen deeply, take them in while the other person talks it through. And part of that is choosing 1 or 2 mindfulness practice that you are interested in that might help you. And then we're going to come back into a larger group. So we'll have, I guess, 1 group of 3, and then we'll have the rest as 2. And then I'm going to invite you to come back and report how your experience was. So Carrie's going to...
1 second.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm happy to see you all back again. I'm really looking forward to hearing why don't you just share some highlights? What are your top 2 productivity and distraction challenges? I'd love to hear. Why don't you just go ahead and unmute yourself and help me to know more, or put in the chat, or both?
I'm always noisy, so I'm okay to go first if that works for everybody.
Thank you.
I was in the chat with Lynn, and although I couldn't hear her perspectives, she got to hear mine, which was great. But one of my main challenges when it comes to mindfulness, I'll say, is actually working from home. I find it really distracting because I want to go do other things to maintain my household. And even though I've got this dedicated space for my work, it's still really, really hard and challenging for me. So I was thinking doing that time blocking with the actual timer. Like I know I put it in my calendar, but because I do that so frequently, I don't always listen to my calendar. But I like the idea of having an actual timer. I thought that would be really helpful. And just being more okay with getting up and moving around and not trying to like slog through work for extended periods of time if I feel like I'm not being productive anymore. So I really love those 2 ideas or strategies.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jade. I see Suzanne has her hand up. Will you unmute yourself and go ahead, Suzanne?
Yes, thanks. I really enjoyed this exercise. Thank you for doing it. It showed all 3 of us that we have so much in common as far as our struggles and how we find they what kind of helps us to get through the day. And it was really nice because I feel like as entrepreneurs, we often feel isolated, and we feel like we're the same ones going through what we're going through. So that's the biggest thing I got out of it. So thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And I see on chat, we've got someone who says, I know what I should be doing, but I'm not doing it. That's interesting. And then Carol also responded, said the same. Boundaries with time, turning off my cell phone and not answering messages during my off hours. That's so a sense of being pulled and knowing that this is the right way or the correct response, but then we go ahead and do it anyway. That's an internal boundary thing, right? You need therapy, not coaching. No, I'm just kidding. We all need to work on that, right? What's my internal boundary and how do I support myself so that I can reach that aspiration? And one of the ways that we know is right is we do very small steps so we don't get kind of overwhelming. Now, someone has said, Jackie has said, oh, working from home like Jade, she lives in a bachelor apartment, so everything is in her space, including her cat. Some solutions are to work from a cafe, which is what you're doing today, co-working space, library, but if I want to be productive from home, some opportunities are to use the Pomodoro technique and taking mindful breaks to walk around the block without my phone, which I used to do between online classes and found it helpful. Thank you. And I see Lynn has also, she's unable to speak because she's on phone. I use an hourglass with 50-minute work hours and 10 minutes to scurry around and move energy in my body and mind. The hourglass is great because it's old-fashioned tech. Someone says, I love that idea. Our group struggled with ADHD, perfectionism, and lack of sleep and energy. Yeah, those are all key things, isn't it, that we struggle with. And ADHD, you know, we know how popular that's become as a diagnosis. Is it just because we're becoming more aware of it? Is it because we understand it better? So we're starting to get sort of more depth of that. Brene Brown talks about perfectionism. Underneath perfectionism, she says, is shame. And so learning how to let go and let things be good enough. And Carrie's a great example of that. Just here on break, she was going to go to every small group and be with folks. And then instead her computer ended up doing something weird and she couldn't get in and she got kicked out. So how do we let ourselves be good enough? And I think, Carrie, that's a real gift that I've learned from you in our business coaching and in our WE-CAN thing, is to let it be good enough and to strive and aspire, but not get stuck in perfection. And lack of sleep and energy is huge for most of us, and learning how to kind of manage that in a way that incorporates mindfulness. Someone talks about the more they work, the more money they make, but then neglecting household chores after a 12-hour day. It's really tough to be moderate, isn't it? To walk the middle way where we do enough, but not overdo it, is definitely part of mindfulness. And most of us struggle with that, trying to find it right-sized for sure. Stephanie says, you love working from home, but no one knocks on my office door and the laundry breaks help. I sit and do not take proper lunch or movement breaks. That's part of what we do. This shift post-COVID to many of us working at home, we can just get in. There's no one around to kind of go hang out, what they used to say, hang out by the photocopier and chat with people, right? And Rita says whether to focus on daily sales versus future sales or a succession plan. That's a really interesting thing. So how do we prioritize? How do we allow ourselves to do things that we know we should be doing and shouldn't, don't get stuck in our emotions? And what I've found for me with mindfulness practices over time, there's no quick, easy solution to this, as you all know already. I'm not telling you anything new. But by having a daily meditation practice, what it does is it helps me observe my emotions and thinking with more calmness. So I'm kind of like, oh, there I go again. Part of my training a few years ago was I had to go to 4 10-day silent retreats. I had to have a daily meditation practice. And what I observed in sitting in meditation, especially during the 10-day silent retreats, and we would do 5 1-hour, no phone, no reading, no yoga, 2 meals a day, and the rest in silence walking. We'd have 1 hour of teaching a day. And I observed so much of how the mind hops around, right? Thinking this, thinking that, doing to do that. So when I pull myself back and say, how do I follow through on what I committed to. I'm going to look at my future. I'm going to look at my goals for today, or I'm going to lay down long-term goals. We get more skillful over time through integrating mindfulness, I have found. So finding specific solutions that help you. Someone asked about silent retreats. For sure, to talk with me offline. There's lots of silent retreats available. And I'm just kind of checking the chats, caught up in the day-to-day, whether to focus. Yeah. The more I work, oh yeah, neglecting. So hiring a cleaner to help me every 2 weeks. So what we're starting to do is talk about solutions. Let's live in the solution. And one of the things I'm hoping you'll walk away with today is a personal productivity plan, how you're going to integrate. And folks are saying, I've done 1 day and it was great. Oh, about 10. That's, as an extrovert, silent retreat would be the hardest. It's true, eh? I felt insane at I think it was the second one. And I've shared this with a couple of you before. When I'm sitting in a room, there was 100 of us in a room, and we're sitting in 5 1-hour silence. We don't talk to each other, no eye contact. And there was a woman on the edge who had a little hork in her throat, like that. And she was doing it every few minutes. It was whatever it was for her. And with what I could see was within kind of 15 minutes, I was in a rage. I thought, what is she doing? Like I had these terrible thoughts. I was swearing, sitting there looking meditative, right? My eyes are closed and I'm meditating with the other 100 people while this woman's going, and I literally wanted to kill her. In my mind, I pictured leaping on her and strangling her. It was so embarrassing to myself because, of course, you're all still sitting there looking the same, meditating, right? And it revealed so much to me about myself. So I've become more compassionate with myself and with all of us, right? We all have perfectionism. Most of us have shame and guilt and struggles with that. Most of us try really hard. And we just step at a time, we get better at that. I know the working thing, Carrie says she'd lose her time. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to keep observing ourselves with more compassion. Then I went back and studied mindful self-compassion, and I've hosted a couple of retreats on that too, and workshops, because learning how to be compassionate with ourselves when we observe, you could hear me, I'm a bit embarrassed even saying it now, right? That I want to just, in my mind's eye, I was literally strangling the woman. I couldn't believe she was there. I got so full of self-righteous indignation. It was quite, not as silly, right? Because of course anyone would feel nuts. Lots of people did, some people didn't. So how do we learn to observe ourselves with compassion? Because that's really the key, and still follow through on what we say we're going to do. So I wanted to talk to you about creating a personal, mindful productivity plan. We want to leave some time at the end to make sure that we have lots of time to have discussion or answer questions. But what I'd like to shift to now, if it feels right for you folks, is to really think about what would that look like for me? So we've all done productivity, and you might be, I know that WE-CAN is offering a couple of things to set your New Year's goals and solutions. And I do one every year where I create, I look back on the past year, and then I set my goals for the upcoming year, and then I personal as well as professional. And then I also really look at how I can build in very specific goals. And I have a goal development partner that I meet with once every 2 weeks for an hour. And so we hold each other accountable. So there's lots of ways that we can create mindful productivity. So I'd like to invite you to think about, and you can reflect on this. You can put something in your phone. You can write it down if you've got paper and pen. I want you to think of the mindful techniques that I suggested. Is there one particularly that either you don't do yet or that drew your energy, thought, oh, I'd like to try that? Is there one thing that you could do that would help your mindfulness? And of course, part of why we're doing this together is because we want to increase our productivity as women entrepreneurs and leaders without getting overwhelmed and stressed. We want to manage that. So for you, is there one mindful technique that would help you on this path? And then I'm going to invite you to practice it for 30 days. and think about how you're going to remember to practice, because part of the thing we do, right? We say, I'm going to do this. And then we forget on day 7. We're like, oh, what was that I was supposed to do? So how are we going to remember for the whole 30 days? Most research shows us that if we do it for 30 days as a habit, it can really help us to shift. So behaviors are one thing. So for example, how many people brush their teeth regularly every day? Just raise your hand or put in the chat, yes. How many people brush their teeth regularly? All of us, right? That's a habit. We've been well ingrained in that in the Western world. Not everyone does that across the world, but in our daily routine. So it's become a habit, and it's not something we have to wrestle with. So when we do the same things every day, they shift from I have to wrestle and remember and figure it out to becoming a habit. I don't have to wrestle with myself about brushing my teeth. So what we want to do is take something and make it a habit. And one of the ways is to practice every day, make it simple, make it small. So, smoking used to be a habit that lots of people had. Less and less now. We smoke? It's a habit I smoked for years. And then I quit 20 years ago, over 20 years ago now. And it was a terrible habit. And it was just a habit. So I had to let go and stop doing it. So habit trumps willpower. Habit trumps willpower. When it's in great, like you don't have to wrestle with your willpower about brushing your teeth, right? So having to consciously choose to do something that takes too much energy and is too likely to be forgotten or overridden by another priority, especially if you've got young kids and our jobs are quite demanding. One of you said 12 hours a day. So the easiest way to change a habit is choosing something that takes 5 to 15 minutes daily, fits into your current schedule, doesn't require you to spend money, and is something you actually enjoy. So I want you to think about that. What are the steps that I need to do to shift into regular positive habits? And I'm going to start with 5 to 15 minutes, something I enjoy that doesn't cost money, and that then I don't have to continually be making conscious decisions. We want to embed these in our daily routines so they occur whether we feel like doing them or not. So now in your mind or on the paper, in the chat, I want you to write one tool, maybe a mindful technique that I suggest, and I can go back over them if that's helpful, that you commit to every day for the next 30 days. You can also unmute yourself if you'd prefer to talk. So I'd like to do more neck and shoulder stretches, maybe first thing when I wake up or during a coffee break. So I'd like you to choose, Sarah, say when you're going to do it, and then set your timer for whatever you're going to do, sometime between 5 and maybe 5 minutes. And as soon as you wake up, whatever you do first, the first few things, and then sit and do 5 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever you think of neck and shoulder rolls. So the more specific we are, and then every morning, that's when your willpower trumps your, I don't want to do it today. And it says, we're just going to do it. We're going to try it for 30 days. You can tell I'm always coaching myself like that. We're just going to try it for 30 days. And by then it's either integrated as a habit or it hasn't been helpful. So I like that. 5 to 10 minute meditation. So Katie, for you to make that commitment, choose a place you're going to do it in your house, go to the same place every morning, and decide when you're going to do it. When you wake up, if you drink coffee, are you going to have a coffee first? Like really put the details. It's in the details that's going to help us change it to a habit. So every morning I go to the same place to do my meditation. I do it as soon as I finish my morning routine. And then I go and sit down for 20 minutes and set the timer. So then it's become a habit so that I do that. So we're getting more specific. Meditate for 5 minutes after I feed cats. Commit to reflection every day for the next 30 days. Begins today. Yay. I think the Pomodoro technique would be most impactful. That's great. A sticky note inside my laptop, so I remember when I open it up. That's beautiful. Breathing. You can also Google breathing, right? Because James Nestor, who's this journalist who did all this stuff about breathing, there's lots of research now in the Western world that shows what the yogis knew 2,000 years ago are indeed true. Breathing through the nostrils, expanding, just the practice I did with you a few minutes ago, and then expanding the lungs. So that breathing practice has been shown to be really beneficial. I love that idea of breathing while waiting for my coffee to brew. Online yoga in the back room after the dogs even walk. Look at that. And setting your timer and doing it. Maybe you want to do it every day or 3 times a week. Add in mini meditations while my clients are processing. Beautiful. So yeah, it's not that we can't be fluid. Timing will fluctuate with services. It's remembering to do it and building into a habit. I commit to reflection, writing every day for the next 30 days. Oh, that's not what I already read. Sorry. Great gratitude. A gratitude journal is something that is very powerful. And again, I love the research, right? I'm a researcher geek, as you can tell. So research shows that when you commit to something, and a gratitude journal is a key way that when we live in gratitude, we're less likely, way less likely to be complaining about what's going on. If I may suggest one thing around gratitude journaling, to really feel it. So, and if you're stuck, you can do simple things like, I have a roof over my head. I had enough food to eat today. What someone I know said, I have a Canadian passport. And I was like, wow, that's such a simple thing, right? So I just traveled recently to Jamaica a couple of weeks ago for a family wedding, and a Canadian passport is an amazing thing. So think of things that, and then really feel them, really feel them. And I've been doing that for 5 years, and it does make a difference. Not a toxic positivity. Everything's all great all the time, no matter what, because there are difficult, sorrowful things in our lives and in our world that we need to acknowledge and face. But feeling grateful for what we do have is a key thing. I really like that you're doing that. Deep breathing before I eat incorporates more mindful eating, and the Pomodoro technique at work. Beautiful. So the other thing we might want to add is how you measure your progress. So you might want to say, I don't know, just ballparking, like the way I said at the beginning, how stressed are you at work, 1, 5, or 10, or somewhere on that continuum. So some idea of how stressed do I feel now, or how do I want this to help me? And then at the end of the 30 days, looking back on that first one and saying, okay, how did it help me? Do I feel different? And then you may want to add another one, or you may want to wait and give yourself a break, because as we're moving into, our next thing will be our January resolutions. We want to do key ones that help us. Yeah, the critical thinking, eh? Oh, thanks for the inspiration. That's really cool. So critical thinking is the key that I have found over years. I used to be a very critical thinker of self and others. Usually when we're critical of others, we're critical of self. So I have found building my capacity for self-compassion is key. Dr. Kristen Neff, who you may have heard of, is a mindfulness self-compassion guru, I would say, in North America and Europe. She's quite amazing. She's got a website, selfcompassion.org, that you can go to. And so when we're harsh to ourselves, or we're harsh to others, that it's a way to, how do we bring ourselves? I'm in a place now in the last year where I made a commitment to be non-negotiable with self-criticism and criticism of others, because in that way we begin to bring a sense of, Kristen Neff said there's 3 things for self-compassion. The first one is mindfulness, which is what we're already practicing and aware of. The second one is that sense of we are all here on this planet with each other. So not isolation. Someone mentioned that they felt less isolation. And the third thing, wait a sec. So mindfulness, less isolation, more common humanity. Oh, and that we all make mistakes. That's the third thing. Every single person on this planet, almost 8 billion of us, make mistakes. So it's the opposite of perfectionism. It's being good enough. And Kristen Neff is really good with that. Her recent book, Fierce Self-Compassion for Women, identifies that very clearly. that we need to be fierce in our self-compassion for ourselves. That's when I set up I'm no longer negotiating with self-criticism or criticism of others. Soon as I notice it, I wrap it up in a blanket of self-compassion and say, oh, honey, that's really hard, because it doesn't help us. Self-criticism just harms. And I want to do a kind of a shout out again to Carrie around this. I find you very skillful at that, Carrie. And you've really, like today when we were getting ready to come on here and making sure all the tech work stuff again, right? She just kind of said like how proud she was of me, how hard I've worked. So we can learn more and more to give that to ourselves. I love it when Carrie gives it to me and others, but giving it to each other, like, wow, just showing up here and doing our practice, the commitment you've made to move forward is really beautiful. So to celebrate, that's the other thing that Kristen Neff talks about, small moments of celebration for ourselves. When I studied the mindful self-compassion and became a facilitator, I started to make more and more significant changes myself. And then, of course, most of you are probably familiar with Brene Brown, who says perfectionism is, I said that, shame is the shadow underbelly of perfectionism. So learning how to be good enough and make mistakes and not have to do it perfectly. So I've kind of talked through these things, and Carrie saying sign up for the WE-CAN News Digest. Stacy, who was on here earlier, I'm not sure she's still here, is doing a workshop on tiny habits for big success. Stacy is awesome. We're in a Kingston Coaches Collective group together, and I really have enjoyed our connection. She's really skillful. So I was responding to the critical thinking because it's been such a bugaboo for me. I've carried it on my shoulders, and I've made some progress through using self-compassion. I'd really support that. And someone said, how do you define critical thinking? As a process and cycle of stages that repeat, ingest, reflect, modify. I don't really know what that all means, Lynn. Fear, self-compassion, reframing the idea of mistakes. Friction is not failure. That's a good one. Lynn, I don't know if you wanted to say any more about what you mean about the critical thinking. I'm not familiar with that, what you said. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my...
I love that. I was saying, Susan, that even just listening to your voice is so calming. Right from the beginning, I think we're all just going to leave here and our heart rates have just all just kind of gone down a little bit, and we'll be healthier for it for the rest of our day. I would love to open, I think you wanted to open this up for questions.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Did you want to advance to the slide just with your contact information in case somebody needs to leave?
Sure. So I'm saying all these things already. Habit trumps willpower, practice, every little step counts, link a new action to an already established action. It's easier to do something than not do something. And so in summary, the becoming aware of your mindful tools and use them to build your mindful leadership. And practicing helps you to reduce stress, improve focus, and increase productivity. That was our kind of aspiration for today, that you would lose some tools. And then I created the 5. And also recognizing sometimes we can feel really stuck. And so by recognizing the power of possibility, sometimes that has gotten me out of the stuckness. So that's been helpful to me. And I wanted to end with this quote from Matt Taney. The primary job of a leader is to serve, empower, and inspire greatness with others. And I think that, each of us probably does that in more ways than we can even imagine. And I know that Carrie doesn't take herself too seriously, but I do feel that that's part of your work, Carrie, is serving, empowering, and inspiring. I don't know about greatness in others, but even how you support each of us as we move forward to be more skillful at these presentations, and how calm you are, and how often and how much you kind of mentor us. And I think of all the ways I do that with others. And I just said I was down in Jamaica at a family wedding for a week, 2 weeks ago, with my daughter, who has a 4-year-old. And she called me yesterday and said, Mom, I realized how easy that week felt. That's because you stepped in over and over again. And I took her daughter to the water park for 2 hours or something I'll take her out for dinner. I'll take her for the ice cream. I'll take her. So it's that idea about how do we serve while still sustaining our deep internal boundaries. because without those, we don't really have a way to give to others. We have to fill ourselves up, and then out of that, we serve, empower, and inspire greatness as best we can in others. And I bet each of you do that in different ways. And I want to kind of celebrate that the WE-CAN brings us together to talk about that. How can I celebrate the ways that I already do that? And then maybe add another one, because we're constantly self-improving in this culture. And sometimes it's celebrating what we've already done and who we are. So I think that's a beautiful kind of thing. And then if you're interested in more mindful leadership coaching, I do these kinds of presentations. I have a lot of presentations. And one of the things I'm going to talk with Carrie next week is about putting them on more on Eventbrite, and beginning to build more of that. You know, I love doing them. Right now, I have a Mindful Monday group, which are every Monday at noon, and you can drop in. For the first one is free, and then it's $25, or most people sign up for the month and then they get the recordings, and that's Mindful Mondays at noon. So you can DM me, or you can email me, info@SusanCoach. You can set up a 30-minute complimentary session to talk through how would this benefit. I often meet with leaders. I often meet with women who are saying, I need to shift how I'm doing this at work, or I need to overall in my life do this. So I'm happy to sort of meet with you and chat through if this would be helpful to you. And then you can also connect to me for one-to-one coaching. And then you can sign up for my newsletter, which I send out with tips and information. So info@susancoach.ca or Susan Young Mindful Coaching. You can also just Google that, and that will. Oh, thank you.
And I did put a link to that in the Zoom chat, so anyone can just click on that right now, or Google her later. I think we've all had just a taste of what Susan can offer in this space, and you know, anyone who is either struggles with it or is just passionate about it and wants to go deeper. You know, that's why we love to showcase the skill sets of our WE-CAN clients right in the Kingston region. I know not everyone's in the Kingston region on the call today, but obviously you can work with Susan online as well, which is amazing. But thank you, Susan, from all of us for that. So just as we're wrapping, I know some people may have to go, but are there any questions that perhaps didn't get answered? And feel free to ask in the Zoom chat, or you can come on to come off of mute. Just taking a look to see if we talked about critical thinking. I think most of the questions that were in there. Oh, go ahead, Tara. Yeah.
Hi, I just have I don't know if you have any strategies. I find my biggest concerns is that shift, that transitioning from work to home. And I don't know if you have any suggestions or strategies that have worked for people in the past, or I know in my head, oh, I should go for a walk, or I should do a meditation, but sometimes my brain's going so much that it's like, it's even, I find it really hard to meditate and be mindful at the end of the day.
That's so challenging, eh? Especially if you have young children, but at any time really. So I would ask you to think about what are when I'm doing any transition, what are the tools that work most effectively and skillfully for me? So finding ways and trying different things over a period of time until they become a habit. That's that thing about habit trumps willpower. So we get stuck, we don't know how to make the changes, and then slowly when we integrate certain things that help us. So it's like something might be calling a friend for 2 minutes, or getting really dancing. There's all this new research. I don't know if anyone's heard about it, but that dancing, and I'm doing this now, trying to do 5 minutes a day. I put on really great music. I'm always on the hunt for it. And I dance for 5 minutes. My energy completely changes if I'm stuck and can't make a transition. So I would invite you to get really creative and think about, what do I love to do? And is there any way, even if you've got young children, you walk in and you plug into music for 5 minutes, that itself can be something that your kids might enjoy, or your partner, you can talk to them about it. So get really creative, right? Rolling in the snow, or I don't know, like really think outside the box, drawing, calling a friend and saying, I need help with this transition. Like there's so many ways that we can do that will allow us to shift from the resistance or the struggle to what we know we should. We have to get creative, because most of us have been told so much, do this, don't do that. And how do we really get creative around what is it that, you know, if I wasn't such a whirling dervish 25 years ago and wasn't I got diagnosed with anxiety and I was like, what? I didn't come into mindfulness because it was easy. I came into mindfulness because I was a nut bar with anxiety, and I had to keep taking steps to calm myself down. And I've made some progress over time, but I come to it because this has been a personal aspiration and passion of mine. So I'd invite you to spend some time talking to your partner, talking to your friends, talking to family. What do you know? What has worked before? Getting really creative with what, but try the 5 minutes of dancing too. See if that helps.
When you say that, get creative, to me, it's like get playful. I hear the words get playful because as kids, like I know kids, like, don't get me wrong, are super stressed today for so many reasons, but at our heart, at our core, we're not stressful beings. We become stressed out, I think. And so it's like, what did I enjoy as a kid? Like you mentioned like playing in the snow. So imagine I was thinking of snow angels and tobogganing, and we're in the midst of a blizzard where I am right now, skating outside. Like, is it hugging my dog? Is it baking? Like, is it just making a mess in the kitchen? Like, giving ourselves permission to kind of tap back into that girl that we all were at one point, and what was playful for her, and let's go back there. Like, I mean, as adults, like you said, Susan, we get so trained, do this, don't do that. And we're like, yeah, but what is the thing that I play in and make a mess in, and it brings me joy? So that's where my head went when you said get creative.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and say other ideas. Someone put in something about get home from work and Katie said, change my clothes to let my brain know. So yeah, it's teaching our brain, paying attention to that. Yeah, other ideas, feel free to just.
Can we say that? We're being recorded on Queen's YouTube. Just take off your bra, like it's like, to change it to something comfortable. Transition habit.
It's a good one.
Anyone else, as we're wrapping up today, we're going to have we're going to have a mindful and relaxing afternoon. Yeah, changing clothes. Yeah.
And some of you may need to leave, but I'd love to do a 3-minute meditation to close us off of inviting self-compassion. Is that something?
Why don't you get ahead and do that?
Okay. Is that good for folks? Anyone else want to add anything before we do that? Feel free to just unmute yourself, add something in the chat. Feel free to leave if this doesn't fit for you. So I'll do a mindful self-compassion 3-minute meditation. I'm going to set my timer. Okay, so I invite you to put everything down. Let your hands rest in your lap. Roll your shoulders up and back. Close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, and if not, drop them down to the ground. Drop into your heart, into your belly, into your feet. Breathing through the nose, take a couple of deep, full breaths, anchoring into your body. Let even the eyes soften, all around the eyes, if there's any tension there, the jaws, the shoulders, the belly, the legs, even the feet, let them soften. And now invite one critical thought that you've had sometime in your past to come up in your mind. Self-critical, but it might show up first as a criticism of another, something self-critical. And then look at the thought. Let the thought be there and present. And I'm going to invite you to come up with a phrase for whenever you have that thought or something like that thought. And it could be something simple like, I love you, or I'm with you, or I've got your back, or that's not true. So I guess that's not true, it's not great. Find something positive. And when you have any self-critical thought, respond with this phrase. If you can't think of one right off, then just use one of mine. Might be something like, it's okay. So choose a phrase that's positive. And begin to say it over and over in your mind in a really deep, compassionate way, knowing we all struggle with criticism, self-criticism, knowing we all struggle to be present, knowing that we all make mistakes. Saying the phrase like a mantra over and over, whatever your phrase or word is. I'm with you. I love you. To yourself. This is to yourself, obviously. Yeah. And let your, and then just to conclude, bring a hand to your heart and a hand to your belly and kind of just very gently press. Feel the warmth of your hands. And say the phrase once more, the word, I'm with you, I love you, I'm here. And then release the hands, but let the echo of the warmth on your body remind you that you're with yourself here. And then taking one or two more breaths. Keeping your jaws soft, your shoulders, your bellies, your belly, your legs. Slowly opening your eyes. I'd love to hear your phrase if you want to share it, or you can keep it to yourself before we finish our time together here. Feel free to just unmute.
I'm learning.
Say it again, Sarah.
I'm learning.
I'm learning. Oh, beautiful. I love the humility in that. Karu, you had your hand up.
I can do this.
I love that. I can do this. You're perfect just the way you are. I am enough. I love that one. I am enough. I'm more than enough. I love you and I'm listening. I am kind. And as we come to an end of our time together, to that feeling of just think of the goodness we bring to each other, to our work, to ourselves, and letting that be enough. So also a personal productivity plan of 1 key and remembering those and doing it so that it becomes a habit so that you can bring that into your day-to-day work. I so appreciate you, all of you, taking the time to show up and engage as best you could with each of us. And the next one is Stacy, who's here, who's going to be doing the next workshop with WE-CAN.
February, but there are a lot that's coming up. So yeah, absolutely. Keep in touch, everyone. Thank you, Susan, on behalf of all of us. We look forward to putting into practice all the things that we've said, or just one of the things, just even one of the things today. Have a mindful day, everyone. You're all amazing leaders. We're so grateful to know you. Have a great one. Thank you again, Susan. Take care, everyone.
Pleasure.